Welcome to the end of February edition of CityBiz. Happy to be here with you. I'm your host, Melinda Arndt, with Councilman Michael Halley as we melt on out of February and into March. And aren't we glad to see a little melting? At least I think we are. If anybody's happy about it, go ahead and be happy. I'm happy to see it melting and be able to see the roads again. I think in our council news, there's been some discussion of upcoming road related events, occurrences?
Improvements,
Improvements,
upgrades.
There's the word.
Yeah, so Burlington Avenue. The story goes that it used to be part of Highway 34. So it was the Department of Transportation's jurisdiction and responsibility to maintain, similarly to how Highway 1 that runs through town still is. So when the bypass was put in, obviously that made traveling around Fairfield better for the travelers, and it kept a lot of those large trucks off our main street that goes through town, our main east-west thoroughfare. However, it transferred ownership of what's now called Business 34 from the State Department of Transportation to the city of Fairfield. And that's a lot of street that we suddenly have to add on to the rest of the streets that we're responsible for maintaining. The DOT, before they transferred ownership, did an overlay. So they put an asphalt overlay, and they restriped the lanes. So it used to be 2 lanes in each direction, and then a yellow line in between. So as per their new safety standards, they put in 1 lane in each direction and a shared turn lane in the middle. And then there was some extra space because those lanes, 3 lanes obviously don't take up as much space as 4 used to. So what they did is they just added these white lines on either side of the street that formed this kind of non-traveling space for vehicles between the curb and that line on both sides of the street. And it's been used unofficially by cyclists. It's been used by pedestrians, because there are no sidewalks once you go west of 12th Street on Burlington. But it's been kind of this undesignated zone for so long. The stripes that were installed I think it was something that was kind of new for the DOT at the time, but it's become maybe a little bit more of a standard practice. Instead of just striping the surface layer, they actually grind down a little bit, and then they put the stripe in this small depression. So it lasts longer, and it's lasted a long time. The stripes out there have lasted a long time, but there's a picture of the 4th Street intersection, and you can see, especially where traffic turns, the stripes have been rubbed off over years of use, which is expected. So some of the stripes aren't as visible along Burlington and the high travel areas. So it's time to consider restriping. The city was thinking, well, if we hold off until we actually resurface the whole thing, or a big portion of it, we can stripe it then, but that's not going to happen anytime in the next few years. So the city council voted to hire the local engineering firm, French Reniker, to do a study for us on the cost of restriping. And what they're going to be looking at is potentially narrowing the traveling lanes and or the center turn lane a little bit, bringing it down to more standard width to allow a little bit more space in those lanes on the sides that have been just kind of these undesignated lanes, but then looking at what would it take to make them official bike lanes. So bike lanes have certain standards of how much width they have to have, and the current space that's out there does not meet those standards. But it's worth exploring as an option. Now, narrowing the lanes for vehicles has been linked with improving safety. So wide open spaces make people drive faster. It's just the way we feel about those spaces. We feel safer to go faster when the space is wide and free of obstructions. And traffic specialists are now learning that was the kind of the perfect road in their minds, was wide and you could see everything. And they've learned, well, then people drive faster. So that behavioral element is now being taken into account. And now you see a lot of what's called road diets, where the road space is narrowed. And then you add things like bike lanes, and you add things like street trees, and you do things to make people feel like, oh, I have to slow down because I can't necessarily see everything, and my driving space is a little narrower. That's a little bit of a side story, but the point is we're looking at this now. What would it cost to restripe, and is it worth looking at bringing the traveling lanes in a little bit towards the middle so that we could have a little bit wider space on the edges for bikes and or pedestrians.
I think it wouldn't take, the lanes are almost wide enough for the bike lane. It just needs a little bit of a,
Yep.
not a major chunk. It's been 13 years. I didn't realize it had been that long since we've had that middle turning lane. Anyway.
Yep. And it's amazing those stripes have lasted that long. If they had done the standard way, it wouldn't have worked, but it's actually a tape that was put in these slight indentation or these depressions that allowed it to last longer, because that meant the vehicles didn't rub it nearly as much that way. So, and we would look at doing that again. It was a good system and it worked well. So that's what we would look on for the replacement, is using something similar technology.
Well, we will stay tuned for further developments now that French Reniker is looking at it, and we'll render a report. And we know with city things do not move at lightning speed. Everything is considered in a very thorough way. So stay tuned for updates.
Yeah, government is slow on purpose. It's to give everyone time to have input and make sure you consider things thoroughly.
Another ongoing, I called it an ongoing saga, it's just the way things are developing, is with the new fire station. I understand there's now a task force for that.
Yeah, so just at this last council meeting, the city council voted to create a task force, and it's just a temporary task force specifically to look at all the components of what would go into the new fire station. And so it's 14 members. There are 13 members currently, so we're still looking for the 14th. One member is a city council person. It's Councilwoman Katie Anderson, who's the chair of the Public Safety Committee. So that's the committee that works with the fire department most closely. And so the first order of business is this task force. It's all citizens will tour both locations. So they'll tour the current location, and then they'll take a tour of the former DOT site that the city purchased, and both buildings on that site. And they'll start to consider what new features the fire department will need. And then that will help determine which site makes the most sense for building. So, I think at some point later this year, we'll be able to narrow it down from 2 sites to 1, and then develop a more detailed scope of work. But they're going to be, looks like they're going to meet pretty much monthly through the spring and summer. And by maybe September or October, I think the bulk of their work for that portion will be done, in terms of kind of helping the council and the city decide on the location and the scope of work. And then if it does need to be funded through public bond, and then the voters would have to be involved, just like the Pool and Gym Task Force was available to provide information, held a number of public information sessions, went and visited different groups in town. There's a lot of outreach that's involved when you want the voters to be as informed as possible before making a decision like this. So it's not I don't believe anything near as expensive as the pool and gym project, so it won't be as much money that's being considered, but still, it'll be most likely millions total, though there may be some other funding sources involved. So we'll see more, but now it's great to have the citizen group engaged, and they'll get started on helping to figure this whole thing out,
which will eventually result in a new and improved fire station that can adequately serve the needs of our firefighters. So it
Yeah.
is interesting, learning how all these things progress. And yes, the public. So you don't ever want people coming up and saying, what? Why didn't I know about that?
And yet you'd be surprised how often that happens, no matter how hard we try to, on the city
Yeah.
side, put it out there. It's inevitable that, we'll be discussing something like, say, for example, this mixed use zone. We've been talking about that for all of last year, and this year, and we'll be talking about it through the spring. But when it's finally done in June, I can almost guarantee someone will come and say, "What are you talking about? I didn't hear anything about this."
Well, aside from knocking door to door and handing out flyers, what are you going to do? I think the city council does a great job, both with print media, this media, other social media, really these days. But yeah, anyway, not to take up too much time. Yeah.
And why we're doing this. This is supposed to be a bite-sized review of some highlights from city council. If people aren't interested in watching an hour plus long meeting, that's the idea behind CityBiz. It's, get your news in 15 minutes.
So I will try to reshare this a number of times. I usually only share it a couple times. And anyway, part of that is our job too, and getting it out here. But on to the next topic. This is an interesting one because we've seen it come up in the state government, or at least I've heard about that. And how about COVID-19 policies for our Fairfield city facilities?
So in brief, when there's a state law or state policy, local governments have to abide by that, but they are also allowed to be more strict. They can't be less strict. So if there's a state law that says, that people have to wear masks in certain spaces, city can't not comply with that. That's state law. It's law of the land. But we can add policy of our own on top of that. So I think one thing that was needed to be understood is that's the truth for private businesses. That's true for anyone who is a private or, who owns or operates a facility of any kind. So, for example, City Hall is open to the public and you don't have to wear a mask to come in and pay your utility bill. But our policy currently is you wear a mask to come to a public meeting. So if you want to come address the council at one of our meetings, we still meet in person. A lot of cities have gone to complete virtual meetings, but we meet in person, but we try to distance and we wear a mask. So that's our policy, regardless of what the governor does or doesn't mandate. Similarly, the library is still deciding to be closed to patrons. That's their policy that their board and director have agreed on for their facility, and our park department as well. So our recreation center currently has a mask mandate when you come in to use the facility, and they have their own board that advises their director. And so regardless of whether the governor lifted the mandate that she had in place, that did not lift the city's policy. So it's going to be looked at. They have a meeting coming up on March 1st. They'll consider it, and whatever that body advises their director and whatever the director decides is the policy for that facility. Now, city council, if we wanted to get heavy-handed, could come in and change it. We do have that authority, but we try not to micromanage our city departments, try to allow them to have some autonomy and independence. So that's what's going on. So yes, you still do have to mask up. This is my workout mask. I wear it when I go to the rec center. And yes, it does make exercise definitely a bit more challenging. But until that department decides otherwise, that's their policy. So again, not affected by the governor lifting the mandate that her proclamation or policy put in place. We still have local control, and that's an example of exercising local control.
Well, thanks for clarifying that. It's with all these different, if you go out of town, go anywhere else, and as you say, private companies can make their own decisions about requiring masks. If you go into a large, Walmart-y type store or a small business, this is the freedom of decision-making and especially as regards a private business. So it's good to know the city regulations and city policies. Thanks for the update on that.
You're welcome. And, they may change in the near future, as we watch the trends and such. So it does look like Jefferson County case numbers are dropping, and, hopefully that continues. So we just got to keep an eye on and make that decision based on the information that's available. Yowza.
Well, in another month, it will be interesting to see how we hope the numbers do keep dropping and that things keep getting revised. And the one piece of excellent info that is inevitable is that even now, as the temperatures are warming up, that by the end of March, a lot more outdoor activity can be done. Yay!
Yeah,
back on bikes.
Yeah, cannot wait.
Yeah. Well, thanks for tuning in to the CityBiz. And for more details, why don't you give out the CityGov website if you have it off the top of your head, Michael, just if people want more details.
Yeah, I think it's called the City of Fairfield, Iowa government.
Yeah, that's it.
A great place to you can keep up with the events the city's hosting, committee events. You can see the agendas. So you just, it's a way to stay informed. And then Jason from Fairfield Media Center always posts the city council meetings, which are both live streamed and available to watch after the fact. So yeah, we always try to strive towards more communication, better communication, more transparency, keeping people informed. You want your citizens to be informed. You have a better functioning government when they are. Yeah.
So thanks for tuning in, and we will catch up with you on the other side of the spring equinox.
That's right.
I'm your host, Melinda Art. Bye, Michael.
See you next time.